Freddie's talked about how excited it was for him Monday to see the whole offense on the field together finally. How about you? What's your thoughts after a couple practices?
Sure. I mean, it's you got to have bullets to move the football, so it's fun to have those guys out there and keep developing the rapport that Baker needs to have with those guys.
What challenges does this Titans defense present you guys?
Well, I think first off, when you watch them on tape, I think they play awfully hard. I know that's easy to say. They play collectively well together, probably better than their pieces would indicate, even though I think they've got a really good number of football players. It's just collectively they do a great job of not giving up a number of explosives. You look at the explosive tape from a year ago, they didn't, you didn't see a lot of balls being thrown over their head. You didn't see a lot of explosive runs, so teams have had to earn it. And they did a nice job in the red zone, so he forced teams to kick field goals.
And what are Odell's intangibles that separate him from a lot of the receivers in the league?
Oh, I've been around him that long. First of all, he's a really gifted athlete. Let's start with that. His balance, body control, ball tracking ability, his hands. So just start with that part of it. That's unique, rare. But then you combine that with he's a really smart football player. I don't think people, they don't understand that part of it, how important it is to him to know what to do, how to do it, where we want him. So I think that's probably a big part of it. But he, like I said, he has a unique skill set.
Did you know much about Jonas Johnson before you got him, and what do you like about him?
No, did not know much about him. And crazy enough, we were 20 miles from each other and didn't know much about him, but he's an excellent football player. One thing he has that, it's when you talk about Odell, you're talking about a unique skill set. When you're talking about D'Ernest, you're talking about a unique mental toughness. I think that's what allows him. His physical talents are solid, but they're a smart, tough football player that you can count on that carries a guy a long way.
And when we've seen him pick up some blitzers, what goes into that? He hangs in against some bigger guys than him, it seems.
Some guys just have edge.
Your level of comfort at right guard with, the different guys you've tried, and then, sticking with Eric Kush for a while, but bringing a couple options in via trade?
We're fine at guard. Every team has, different spots where you've had competition, and, Kush has been in this league a long time. I mean, he's a good football player. So whether it's him or some of the other guys that we brought in or Austin, we anticipate that they'll play well.
Can you give us a little insight into the process of game planning? How much input does Baker have in that? How much does Freddie play in that? What has this week been like?
Well, I think everybody, everywhere I've ever been, this is no exception, where you have a number of people that are involved in the game planning process. You use the expertise of the coaches that you have. Very rarely do you have a staff where, I don't think you want to have a staff where you have individual coaches that don't have input into certain areas. So we divide up areas as a staff, and then we go into the room and decide, we break apart, and there's run part, protection part, there's some of the pass, game that you're talking about. But everybody has different roles in that. But, it's everybody's job and role to be a big part of our game planning and what we see, and because, in my opinion, not one person can see it all. So and then how everybody fits that together.
Baker particularly vocal.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that part of it. No, Baker's a big part of it, and Drew Stanton is as well, being a part of this system in Arizona. He's a big help in that part of it and sees things as most guys that have played as long as he has, and he's really smart. He adds a lot to what we do on a weekly basis.
I'm sure you're prepared for them to obviously, double Odell or do whatever they have to do to take him out of the game. Can you still get the ball to him in part because of Baker's accuracy, and also do you guys feel really good about what else can happen if Odell is minimized a lot?
Sure, there'll be times, especially in the red zone, I would anticipate they'll double Odell. They've shown that in the past, not just Odell. They've shown that against the top receivers in the league, that they'll try to take away your best players, especially, like I said, once you get towards the red zone. I think you have to do a good job of moving him around. You have to do a good job of running the football where they don't want to take people out of the middle of the field to double a receiver. You've got to find a way to take advantage of where he's at. And then when other players have one-on-one matchups, they've got to win. I mean, that's the point of having good skill players, that you've got to be able, when they double one, or if they decide to bracket, not only him but another player, that you've got some matchup issues for them.
How much of a big deal is it, or is it at all, that Odell and Baker didn't get any of those game reps together? And is that something they can make up for in practice the last couple of weeks?
I mean, I think so. I mean, it's still always going to be, with every player you have, I don't care how long they've played together, it's always going to be a work in progress, collectively between the two of them, getting on the same page. It's not nearly as hard when you're talking about maybe a free access route, something simple, but obviously when a player's pressed or something you've put in a given week or something that you don't rep nearly as often, it's critical.
This will be the first time that we'll be able to see all the pieces, all the firepower that you have offensively in an actual game. Are you eager to see what that looks like, what this can be?
Sure. And, and it's only going to continue to get better. In 4 weeks, getting AC back, and then in 8 weeks, Kareem, you're going to add to that as you get going. So we're excited to see it. It's hard anymore. You used to get a little bit better gauge in my mind in the preseason because more guys played. You played more often of kind of where you're at. I'm not sure anybody knows exactly where they're at right now. You have a feeling of where you're at. You like your players' mindsets, but again, you can't fear the season. That's what you do it for, Jake. And everybody knows that. So it'll be fun to get out there and see where we're at. The work that we've put in. We haven't used Nick a lot, really. I don't know how many times Nick has carried the ball in the preseason, if he has. So it'll be exciting to see him because he's a weapon. So it's and even David and Njoku. So we'll see.
Nick, what were your impressions of his training camp, and just what did you learn about him?
Well, he's a pro. I mean, I know he's only been in the league 1 year, but he goes out there every day and works. And so it's fun to have a guy back there that you feel like you can turn around and hand the ball off, and the quarterback can take a break, and he can break arm tackles and run downhill, and it's a great luxury to have.
So do you think that you just talked about it, these guys don't play as much in the preseason as they once did? Does that hold back getting ready for the season, do you think?
If you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have said yes. I would have, as a coach, I don't think you go into the profession believing that reps don't matter. I don't think you ever go into it going, we really don't need to practice or play a game. But the statistics over the last couple of years with experienced players and some of the other teams would say differently. It would say that it's not nearly as important as I would have thought, if that makes sense. Watching the Rams last year when basically I think a number of their players didn't go through the preseason and they were fine. So I'll hold back a little bit of judgment there. But from a coaching perspective, I do believe that reps matter. Otherwise, what do they need us for?
Are you conscious when you go into a game of you obviously spread the ball around a lot last year in Tampa, and it seemed like everybody got their touches and their catches. Do you go into it conscious of that you kind of need to keep guys into the game and try to get it around a little bit, or do you not worry about that?
I think it's important. I've said many times before, I think balance is utilizing all of your skill players where they have to defend the field, maybe not always run pass, but by who your skill players are. What helps that is having really good skill players. So this worked out last year. We had a number of players that deserve the opportunity to make plays in a game. So they were talented players. We were blessed that way at tight end and receiver. I've been places before where you don't have as many of those guys, so now you have to move certain players around to try and get their matchups to utilize their skill set. So it goes both ways. You'd like to have enough skilled players to balance that, but if not, then you've got to find a way to continue to feed the players that are your premier players, your advantage players. You can't get away from that just for the sake of balance. It is a big part of it, but I would say you still want to, feed your players that are deserving of that. I guess the best way to put it.
How important is it for you guys? I mean, I know every team does it, but to go back after practice and watch practice, and how much do you get out of teaching the guys the mistakes there instead of having to stop practice and like rep it again. How valuable is that for you guys?
Well, it's all part of the learning and developing process of anything we do, whether it's the initial teaching part of showing someone on a PowerPoint or a slip of paper that starts off with a plan, and then it's actually going and doing it, or going on the field and doing some of your individual drills and then taking it to the field and then coming back, taking notes and watching it on tape. And it's an eye-opener. I think tape is one of the most invaluable things that we have, not only in game planning but in players seeing, because at times I don't think they understand that the picture is going to show exactly what they did, because their memory of what they thought they did and what it actually ended up happening, like all of us, it looks different. And I realized that years ago. We used to play. I'm going to tell you a little story here, just as a reference, because I forget, and then it comes to me at age 53. We used to play noon basketball hoops all the time at Eastern Michigan 20 years ago, and I had this envision of myself that when we played, I was Danny Ainge or John Stockton, and I was really talented. And then somebody came and videotaped our practice, and I realized that what I thought I was jumping 3 feet off the ground, I was getting 3 inches. And I didn't look nearly as smooth and as athletic as I thought. And I think from a player's standpoint, for them to be able to see it and be able to, what you're teaching them, I think is important.
Said that when they come into the league, that is one of the, we concentrate on the physical, fastest, if the game's faster, blah, blah, blah. They said that's one of the most biggest changes from high school to college and from college to pro. How much film studies involved and just watching stuff like that. Do you see guys sometimes get glassy-eyed with just as much as you guys feed them and watching tape?
Just we get more time with them. I think that's the biggest thing. The time, not maybe in the off season because that shrunk, but when we do have him here during the season, we have him here all day, so it's a job. So, and like anything that any of us do, you're going to get better what you put time into. Whatever you decide to put your time into, you're going to continue to get better if you attack it the right way, which these guys do because they're the best in the world.
With Odell, when he was dealing with that minor hip thing and he wasn't doing team drills, we saw him still go through individuals and he still looked good to me running through those. Did you notice a big change when he finally came back to team, or did you see him kind of free and easy the whole time?
Well, I mean, it's, again, you have to speak to him in terms of how his body felt. I think that's probably the biggest thing. He's played long enough to know where his body stands and where he wants to put himself in a position to push that. Obviously, it's about getting to game day. So you'd have to talk to each individual player. It is fun seeing him running around. And I'm not sure yet we've even seen him full speed yet, but he's been building himself up to getting to that point, and we're excited to get going.
Rashard Higgins now for a little while. What stands out to you about him?
Consistency. That's the biggest thing with Rashard. He can play all 3 positions. You can move him around a little bit. That's probably the biggest thing. You can count on him. He does a nice job when Baker's under duress. You can see that in the years past. I've said, in terms of being an outlet for him, I think Baker has a trust in him playing all those positions. I think that's probably the number one thing. He's another one of those guys that if you probably looked at any one particular part of his game, you would say, there's not one dominant trait, but he's really does a lot of things really well that gives you comfort as a coach and allows you when you go into a game to know that, especially now with his role increasing, our confidence that we'll continue to have success.
I feel like we've seen him in the slot more. What kind of goes into that, like learning how to play in the slot as opposed to outside?
Well, it's the learning part of it is really just about reps. It's completely different when you're lined up outside and the type of routes that you run and the looks you get from a corner compared to nickel and the type of traffic you have to navigate around. And the ball gets on you quicker, when you're in the slot in terms of your hand-eye coordination, your quickness. That's where it's a little bit different. The ball travels obviously further when you're outside. We know that, but your matchups are different, your routes are different, and your spatial awareness is different. So that's where a guy can play in there, but obviously the more that he reps inside, because it is different than being outside, the more efficient he'll be in terms of decision making. You know, because you utilize that guy in 2 minute, you utilize that guy in third downs, utilize him from a matchup issue in terms of at times getting their third corner, their nickel. So it's, you know, from a game planning standpoint and also from a learning curve, it's important for a guy to get some reps in there.